I'm delighted to welcome you all along here today for Capturing Conflict, a day of discussion, deconstruction and debate, considering representations of Ireland's struggle for independence on film. This symposium is the final act in our month-long exploration of the subject, which saw screenings of 8 feature films dealing with the Irish War of Independence and the Civil War, dating from the 1930s to more recent times. We were particularly pleased to present films that are rarely, if ever, seen. Films such as The Dawn, Ourselves Alone, Beloved Enemy and Guests of the Nation. Cine film enthusiasts were rewarded with 35mm screenings. Film historians enjoyed the chronological breadth of the programme, and general audiences could enjoy the wide range of geographic and temporal perspectives on our turbulent past. The feature film programme is, of course, complemented by a vast array of newsreels from the 1900 to 1930 period that are held on the IFI archive player and are available for access free of charge globally. The past month has seen tremendous audience engagement with Irish cinema history in traditional cinema-goers fashion. Today, however, you are in for a more rigorous intellectual workout as we welcome a range of academic investigations of cinematic responses to Ireland's War of Independence and Civil War. The event is part of our ongoing commitment to the creation of critical context within which film culture and Irish cinema culture can be explored. I'm reminded of a significant moments in the IFI's past where there have been potent, dedicated focuses on Irish cinema history and its sociological and historical resonances. Reviewing the Revolution in 1992, a then almost comprehensive programme of cinema and television representations Revolution, celebrated on the 75th anniversary of the 1916 Rising, and the powerful Nationalisms, Visions and Revisions, the conference in 1998, which brought together historians, film academics and politicians from north and south of the border to explore media representations of Irish film history up to the Troubles. And in 2016, we focused on the representation of the 1916 Rising with a programme of sound and silent films that played here in IFI and then toured nationally around the country in what was the first programme of many marking the Decade of Commemorations. We are very pleased to continue this focus here today, refreshed with new perspectives from academics on work that may not have been available 20 years ago, and to investigate Irish history through the complex multiple lenses of Irish and world cinema. We are very pleased to be developing our enormously successful and mutually rewarding partnership with Maynooth University as we collaborate on this event. This is a long-standing relationship and partnership which in 2016 saw us build and open a new research and preservation campus on campus at Maynooth University. We must thank our funding partners for today, Dublin Port, the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media, and our principal funder, the Arts Council, for all of their support of this event. I would particularly like to thank Denis Condon, Sarah Arnold and Maria Pramaggiore from Maynooth University for all of their Trojan work. For my colleague Sniva O'Flynn for putting together the wonderful programme of films that you've all seen over the last month, and for really throwing herself into the deep end and assisting on today, and with some absences on the team and really stepping up. So thanks Sniva for going into the breach on that as well, so much thanks. I'd also like to thank, last but not least, Cassandra O'Connell, the head of the IFI Irish Film Archive, who worked so tirelessly to develop the foundations for this event, who attracted so much goodwill and funding support for the programme, and who continues to lead the archive team in their invaluable preservation work so that these films can be reclaimed from the past for present and future generations. She's really disappointed that she can't be with us here today, but I'd like to extend our thanks to her and to send our very best wishes. And now I'd like to hand over to Denis Condon, who will take over proceedings from Maynooth University. Thanks, Denis.
Thanks so much, Ross. I'm delighted to be here myself and to see we have a live event today. Welcome everybody, welcome to all the participants in what I think will be a wonderful symposium. So I'll keep my remarks short, but I want to welcome you on behalf of the Media Studies at Maynooth, Department of Media Studies, represented here by myself and my colleague Sarah Arnold. We'd like to extend our deepest thanks to colleagues in the IFI Ross has talked about our partnership, and I would just say that on this event, it's certainly been a very collegial event, particularly to Ross, Sunniva, and to Kaz O'Connell, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but was certainly instrumental in putting this event together. The topic of cinema and the war of independence and the Civil War is an important one, and it's perhaps one that's been neglected during the ongoing Decade of Centenaries, not here at the IFI, as Ross has just pointed out, but more generally, it's maybe a topic that hasn't been, cinema and the war of independence, Civil War, hasn't been a topic that's reached maybe public consciousness as widely as it should have done. The struggle for independence, and indeed the resistances to it, of the late 19th and early 20th century ran alongside the emergence of cinema. Cinema emerged right at that time, and in ways analogous to the media technologies of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the cinema as the new media technology of its time profoundly affected Irish society a century ago. So it's to those topics that we turn today, to that period, and to the continuing importance of cinema as the dominant medium of the 20th century that we're going to try and interrogate, try and investigate in the coming hours. It's very fitting, of course, as Ross has outlined. I won't go through that detail, nor do I have that detail that he has just given us. But it's fitting that we're here at the IFI, the place where the Irish filmic heritage is preserved, but not only preserved, but is also disseminated in various ways as cinema, as we'll experience today, in a space, in a communal space where we can have these experiences together, but also through new technologies, through the IFI archive player, where many collections relevant to our topics here today are available. It's worth mentioning, I suppose, the Irish Independence collection in particular, maybe the After 16 collection as well. But those collections, I think, are really vital, and it's wonderful to have them available. As Ross says, they're free. They're available all over the world for researchers in all different contexts. So this is wonderful, and I'm really happy that we're here in the home of Irish film to have this conference. So, do I want to say anything else? Yeah, the film programme, of course, over the last couple of weeks has been an exemplary of that kind of engagement that the IFI has been engaged in over the years. So let me wrap up with that and just say I'm really looking forward to what we have to say over the coming hours. Good luck to all presenters, and I look forward to having chats over coffee and lunch as the day goes on. So best of luck to everybody.
Thanks, Denis. So we'll move on to the first panel. If I could invite the panellists up. Whoever's speaking first can say it. If you'd like to stay in your seats, you can do. This is the first time I think I've actually chaired a conference in probably 2 years or thereabouts. So it's probably the first time I've actually had to think about what am I wearing from there down, and also about plug sockets, because I just realised I need for my laptop. I'll just double check this in a second. So we have 3 speakers today. Or this morning. So we've got Denis Condon, John O'Flynn, and Rita Meriverta. And what I'll do is I'll introduce each as they go along. So the format of the day, this is a reminder for me as well as everybody else, is that we'll have breaks periodically. We have a long lunch break, extended break, where we can kind of chat about each other's papers. And at the end, we're finishing up at around 4:40 today. So we'll also have an opportunity at that point if anybody wants to hang on, but who wants to drink a refreshment as well, we can stay together. Unfortunately, the event for tonight, the big screening, was cancelled, but that just leaves us more time to chat with each other. So, for the first panel then, I will introduce Denis Condon. And so Denis lectures on cinema at the Department of English and Media Studies at Maynooth University. He's a colleague of mine. And his publications include Early Irish Cinema, 1895 to 1921, and he was co-editor of Music and Visual Cultures, Threshold, Intermediality and Synchronous. And he writes an Early Irish Cinema blog as well, and is working on the book The Explosion of Images, Ireland's First Cinemas, and the collaborative website Irish Cinema Histories. And so we're delighted to have Denis here to talk to us today. And Denis is speaking about declaring Ireland a nation on screen 1914 to 1922, which I believe must be behind me.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And welcome everybody again. I shouldn't have sat down. So I'm going to begin with a quote from Dublin's Freeman's Journal of the 28th of January 1922. The great film Ireland a Nation will be produced for the first time at La Scala on Monday. The time is, of course, appropriate for its appearing. The story of Ireland, both in the long ago and even more recent days, is told in terms to excite feelings of sadness and pride in the breast of every patriot. End quote. So let me say something about the time and the place mentioned here in which Ireland a Nation appeared. The time, 28th of January, was 3 weeks after the Dáil had narrowly ratified the Anglo-Irish Treaty, and Ireland, or at least part of it, seemed to be on course to be something more of a nation than it had recently been, even if it was not heading for the more fully independent republic that many now wished for. And the place was La Scala Theatre, Dublin, the largest city cinema with 3,200 seats, and occupying a site beside the GPO on Princess Street that was reconstructed after being destroyed in the fighting of 1916. Part of the La Scala site had previously been occupied by the Freeman's Journal. And it's hardly surprising that the Freeman's Journal was enthused by the title Ireland a Nation, seeing as how the motto formed part of its masthead. But I think the appearance of a film declaring, maybe just entitled Ireland a Nation, in a massive cinema that had displaced one of Ireland's daily newspapers from its historic city centre site, has something to tell us about the changing Irish mediascape at the moment in which the new Free State is groping into existence. So it's partly on this basis that over the next few minutes I want to try to convince you that Ireland a Nation was the most influential feature film of the struggle for Irish self-determination during the War of Independence and up to the outbreak of the Civil War. And I'll argue this as well as observing that it was seen by very few people in Ireland until it ran from January to June 1922. I'd be particularly interested in three phases of the film's life in Ireland: its production in 1914, its abortive exhibition in 1917, and its seeming triumphant return in 1922. So this is a three-acter. Act 1 involves this man, Walter McNamara, born in Lismore, County Waterford, but gaining particular notoriety in the US film industry as a scenario writer for Universal, best remembered for the 1913 white slavery drama Traffic in Souls, which he also produced. This film was an enormous hit for Universal, but it wasn't even on his CV in May 1913 when the US trade journals were watching what would McNamara do next. He was going to England, according to an item from the Moving Picture World in May 1913, on what it calls a matter of film importance. So, why did he go to England? Because Ireland had no studios. Before shooting Ireland a Nation's exteriors in Ireland, he shot interiors at Q Studios near London, becoming a figure of fascination for the British film trade press and British and Irish press more widely. He made public speeches on Irish self-determination and was feted by Irish nationalist organisations in Britain, such as the United Irish League. This is an account from the weekly Freeman's Journal of a rousing farewell from members of the United Irish League of Great Britain. So this is the period between the passing of the Third Home Rule Bill by the House of Commons in 1912, its rejection by the Lords, which meant that it would have to wait 2 years before it was enacted. But Irish nationalism was in that advanced preparation stage for taking on self-government at the national level. Kind of a heady time. And McNamara was there in the middle of it. By the middle of July, he had shot his film, and reports circulated that it would finish with, as the Westminster Gazette put it, a pictorial forecast of the future Irish Parliament after Home Rule has become law, showing how such separation will unite Britannia and Éireann more closely than ever it has been united before. Many Irish nationalist MPs have provisionally promised to sit for this last scene. If such a scene was ever shot, it didn't make it into the film that survives. And a substantial amount of the film does survive here at the IFI, running a little over 43 minutes. About half an hour consists of dramatised scenes of Ireland's fight for self-determination. The surviving copy begins with this intertitle, clearly showing that we've missed part one. And you'll also notice the name Emmett Moore and Gaelic Film Company rather than Walter McNamara, so Walter disappears. This is the version produced after McNamara sold the film to Moore, who distributed it again with updated newsreel material, which I'll describe in a minute. In any case, from other accounts, we know that the first part had dramatised scenes of Grattan's Parliament, the 1798 Rebellion, and the Act of Union. The surviving portion begins with this intertitle relating to Michael Dwyer and the continuing rebellion from 1798 to the Emmett Rebellion of 1803. We see a group of men in fanciful turn of the 18th into the 19th century costumes in a style consistent with other dramatised portions of the film. Both the choice of scenes and the highly gestural and melodramatic style of acting owe much to the Irish patriotic plays known internationally through the work of Dion Boucicault, Dublin-born playwright, but also in Ireland they were elaborated on by J.M. Whitbread and P.J. Burke at Dublin's Queen's Theatre. So, of course, Napoleon appears. Where have I gone? Napoleon does appear. There he is. He's looking to conquer new territories. He meets Robert Emmet with a message from the United Irishmen. And speeding rapidly through, we get the characters associated with the popular cultural versions of the Emmett Rebellion. A dastardly villain, here hiding in the bushes, who betrays the rebellion to Major Sir at Dublin Castle, and even the bravery of Anne Devlin and an alliance with Michael Dwyer can prevent the defeat of the rebellion and arrest of Emmet, who goes on trial, which and gives us the speech from the dock, his execution, which tastefully happens off screen. Sarah Curran comes to mourn him, but even more importantly, perhaps, an angel, or is it Éireann, writes his epitaph and plays the harp afterwards. So we're now almost half an hour into the surviving material. There's then a 2-minute scene of Daniel O'Connell. He's provoked and kills D'Stair in a duel, which also happens off screen. Then the last 15 minutes changes greatly. An intertitle about emigration to America, possibly a famine reference, is followed by a brief acted scenes of people in 19th century costumes getting on a sailing ship. And then we go to an intertitle mentioning a Home Rule meeting in 1914, followed by newsreel of a Home Rule meeting in 1914, with an intercut telegram with news of Home Rule becoming law. It's possible that this scene it stands in for the scene of the Home Rule MPs that we saw mentioned in the article earlier on. That may not have been shot. So you can see a logic of McNamara's film beginning with Grattan's Parliament and ending with, if not the Home Rule Cabinet, then at least that about to be realised here at this Home Rule meeting. But we've gone through a radical representational change here, from enacted scenes in a melodramatic mode to actualities shot in the street. A mythologised past culminates in a wished-for present. Okay, but the remainder of the surviving material wasn't in the 1914 release of the film, because it's all newsreel dating from 1919 to 20, added by Emmett Moore. So instead of getting the arc of Grattan's Parliament to Home Rule Parliament, the next scene is De Valera's reception in America in 1919, some War of Independence shots, particularly focusing on Terence McSweeney, with scenes of his funeral and aftermath dominating in this section of the film. Some brief final shots then attempt to pull this heterogeneous material together, Ireland today is followed by the Statue of Liberty and a US flag. A US flag, yeah. Before an old man with 2 children on his lap turns out to be the narrator who ends the story. So I think you can see that rather than the parliamentary oratorial path to legislative change, the newsreel material captures the conflict of the War of Independence almost by accident. Tacked on to a film about home rule, the earlier, often violent struggles for Irish self-determination reassert themselves in the accretions of contemporary events that bring the film up to date. So let's go to Act 2. These are briefer. In which the film reaches Ireland. The film we think McNamara made, rather than the one that we have now, might have been popular had it arrived back in Ireland later in 1914 or in 1915, but it didn't make it to Ireland for 2.5 years. Copies of the film destined for the Birmingham-based distributor Edgar Hounsell were lost on the Lusitania in May 1915, and a second shipment of the film was also apparently lost at sea. In March 1916, Dublin cinema owner Frederick Sparling acquired the British and Irish rights. This was unfortunate timing. The outbreak of the Rising and subsequent martial law and curfews meant that he had little opportunity to show the film until January 1917. Although he owned the suburban Bohemian Picture Theatre in Phibsborough, Sparling hired the larger and more central Rotunda, and he then submitted the film to the press censor. The censor wrote back to Sparling on the 1st of December 1916, allowing exhibition if 6 itemised cuts were made that constituted much of the contentious political material, including the actualities of the Home Rule meeting. Sparling had no choice but to make the cuts. But now I'm going to argue that the content of the film was largely immaterial. It didn't matter that the censor cut out material likely to work the audience into a frenzy. The popular cinema audience was already on the brink of frenzy, and even the title of the film and the idea that it suggested self-determination or independence was enough to spark them off. Sparling tapped into this feeling by mounting an eye-catching poster campaign. He first had large green posters printed with just the film's title, surrounded by shamrocks, pasted onto the many new hoardings erected around buildings in the city centre destroyed during the Easter Rising. Their effectiveness can be judged by the testimony of contemporary witnesses. Joseph Holloway commented in his diary, I quote him, "You read the poster and wonder when the film is to be shown and what is to be the nature of it. I have heard it whispered that it's a fake, there's no such film at all, but those who love Ireland thought it a good way to keep Ireland a nation in the public eye, and the wide-awake authorities haven't tumbled to its purpose." A week later, however, a new poster confirmed that it was in fact a film by providing more details of the coming exhibition. And this is Holloway again. "I saw on hoarding near Bagot Street end of Haddington Road that Ireland a Nation for 1 week only was announced for Rotunda commencing Monday next and week." And then he adds, kind of wistfully, "And I thought, would we ever have it in reality for 1 week only even?" If he meant the film, then the answer was no. Audiences crowded the Rotunda to get to the film, and those that did get in engaged with the images on the screen by singing, booing and hissing in ways that alarmed the police observers. Brian Mahan, the general officer commanding British forces in Ireland, banned the film after 2 days of its run. Now there's lots more to say about this, but let's forward to Act 3 and finish with a few observations on the film's exhibition in Ireland. This is very brief. In 1922. Sparling had retained the rights to the film in 1922 and finally benefited from its triumphant opening at La Scala at the end of January 1922. The La Scala run was extended into the following week. And the film went on to suburban cinemas and cinemas all over the country. These included Magner's Clonmel Theatre beginning on the 13th of March. So that would have been Patrick's Week. Nina's Ormond Cinema from 18th of April. And Dublin's Rotunda, back to the Rotunda, on the 8th of May. Most of the responses to the film were positive at this in 1922. The more thoughtful newspaper reviews, such as that in the Nina News, focused on the film's place in Irish cinema history in 1917. I quote them. The screening of such a film at a time when the Irish people were just awakening to the fact that the rising of the previous Easter week was neither a riot or a popular disorder, but the determined effort of armed and organised patriots to wrest the freedom of their country from the foreign invader, end of the quote. The focus on the 1917 moment and the final historical polemic here may tactfully be avoiding the limitations of the way in which the film depicts the path to Irish nationhood. But the responses were not altogether positive. And the outcome of a court case almost exactly a century ago on the 26th of June 1922 show this. Sparling took the case against Paul Bernard, proprietor of Limerick's Grand Central Cinema, for cancelling his booking of the film. Sparling won the case, actually, by producing lots of these good reviews that had come out in newspapers to refute Bernard's claim that the film was a dud and that it was not up to the standards of historical events that it should be. Bernard made specific claims about the representation of Emmett's trial and of Anne Devlin, and he claimed that word of mouth in Limerick was that it was a bad film. It was not hot enough for Limerick, is actually the phrase that was used in court. So this was the last major coverage of the film in 1922. So its run came to a somewhat ignominious end. But it could be that with the achievement of the kind of limited self-determination that the film originally celebrated, and on the brink of a civil war where visions of a more fulsome independence were at issue, declaring Ireland a nation was no longer enough. Thank you.